a way to use AI, generative AI, for my work back in the day, I'll tell you what, they would not have been able to tell me nothing. But I felt like if I really wanted to make an impact in cybersecurity, it would have to be through content, through storytelling.
Hey Chris, how's it going?
Going good. How you doing, Day?
I'm doing all right. How's your day been?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah,
Ready to have a good conversation.
likewise. It's really great to have you on. I think this is a conversation that has been a while coming, and I'm definitely glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kind of get started with who you are, what you do, what you've done in the past, and yeah, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, my name is Chris Cochran, and I do too much. That's one way to put it. I am the advisory CISO and chief evangelist at a company called Huntress. Also the co-founder and chief creative officer at Hacker Valley Media. So I'll do everything from talking to people, creating content, teaching storytelling, really the whole gambit. But I spent about 15 or so years in cybersecurity as a practitioner and a leader. Now I'm in content.
That's super exciting, and we're gonna go into all of those details later in the video. But let's start from what life was before going to cybersecurity. Like, what were you doing before cybersecurity? What was your profession like? What did life look like before you got into cybersecurity?
Yeah, before cybersecurity, I was in intelligence in the United States Marine Corps. So I was at the National Security Agency. Luckily, I was doing more of a technical intelligence, but intelligence nonetheless. I've always been fascinated by philosophy, and so logic, argumentation, being able to make assessments based off of very little information is something that I found exciting. So yeah, I would say I got my start in intelligence, and that's what catapulted my career in cybersecurity.
Gotcha. How do you think your experience working in intelligence kind of helped you build a career in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I would say my role in intelligence, because it was a technical intelligence, it really got me back to my roots. I've always loved technology. I was one of those kids that had the little set where you could turn into an alarm system, you could turn into an AM radio. And so I've always been fascinated by technology. I wanted to create Terminators, right? Like Terminator 2. I never got to there, but I've always been fascinated with technology, with computers, and just doing things that people think are magical. And so that's what really got me on that initial path. But when I got into the Marine Corps and I learned intelligence, I was able to combine this love of rhetoric, this love of language, and just high level concepts with technology, the bits, the bytes, and being able to fuse those together is really just kind of set me on a path for threat intelligence, big leadership at cybersecurity, and then ultimately creating content of a technical nature.
Gotcha. So, of course, with your intelligence background, I'm sure that could have opened a bunch of different doors for you, but why did you specifically choose cybersecurity when you were deciding to move forward from intelligence or combine that intelligence experience with something else? Like, what was the reason why you specifically chose cybersecurity rather than something else, like, probably doing intelligence for something like software engineering or, something in a different dimension? Why cybersecurity specifically?
I wanted to be a hacker, man. I wanted to pop boxes. I went through a lot of different training. The closest I got to being a hacker is I really got deep into lock picking, and I was a part of a company called the Core Group, where we'd go around and teach pen testing, physical pen testing. We would teach lock picking and all of that. But I would say that I never got to the red side, the deep red side of being able to be, whether you want to call it a pen tester or you want to call it offensive operator, red teamer, never really got to do it. I've gotten to lead those folks, but I never got to get hands on keyboard doing a lot of that work, just in the schoolhouse. But in threat intelligence, I got exposure to all of those things. So understanding all of those concepts, understanding what red teamers are doing, what the actors are doing, what all these folks are doing is really important for a threat intelligence analyst. So at least I got to read about it, right? I got to understand the technology. I got to understand the concepts, the TTPs and all that. So that was the closest I ever got to the hacker side of the house. And that's what's always been appealing to me, is the hacking, the doing the thing that it wasn't intended to do, right? Make it work in your favor. And I mean, but we could go through a whole different podcast focused on like, how do you hack different things, right? How do you hack relationships? How do you hack careers? How do you hack cybersecurity in general?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about hacking at the end of the day. And I would say that that's the initial bug that bit me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that really draws a lot of individuals to cybersecurity, that curiosity and just the ability to, hack things like in the real essence of what hacking is, like making something do what it wasn't intended to do, or exploring other possible things that this thing, doesn't normally do. But I think that's really cool. And we can dig a little bit deeper into your threat intelligence experience. So throughout your career, almost spanning about 2 decades now, how have you built your expertise and established yourself within the threat intelligence field?
Yeah, a couple different ways. Obviously, in the very beginning, a lot of my stuff was classified, so I wasn't able to speak about it. But when I made that pivot to commercial cybersecurity, I was able to learn the tools, the techniques that we're using in industry and be able to say, okay, so I can apply my learnings from the government, not necessarily from a technical or classified perspective, but from a process improvement perspective, bring some of that learning into the field of threat intelligence. And I would say it was probably about 2019 when I started doing threat intelligence for Netflix that I ended up coming up with a framework that people still use today called the Easy Framework. And I thought, I was like, wouldn't it be nice to have an easy button for people that were either starting a threat intelligence capability in an organization or looking to correct one, that they could just press it and get back on track. Because to be honest with you, when I went to Netflix, I felt like I was in over my head. I'd spent 10 years or so building different threat intelligence capabilities, but when I got to Netflix, everything was just so different. The technology was different, the people, the processes, everyone's brilliant. Everything at Netflix is pretty much homegrown and created there. And so I was like, well, I can't leverage all of my old information. I need to do something different here. And so that's when I came up with the Easy Framework, and it's an acronym. And so E is a list of requirements. Because I was coming in, I was like, oh, I'm just going to use all my old information. But no, you need to get new requirements from the people that you're working with. So have conversations, do interviews with people that you're going to be supporting. Get those requirements. And once you have those, you assess your collection plan, which is the A. Figure out what's the information you need, what access do you need, internal to the organization and external, right? Think about all the questions you might be asking and what are the data sets in order to answer those. S is strive for impact. I can't tell you how many times I've been a part of teams where we thought just, hey, we're going to pull together all the threats that happen all around the world and just send that out to the whole company. And the best thing you'd probably get is a thumbs up emoji from somebody. So that's probably not the best way to use your time. But if you're trying to strike for impact, you're really trying to make a difference in that organization. So what is the most important information that someone can digest today to move the needle on security? And then Y is yield to feedback. We send stuff out and we never ask anything about it. That is the worst way to really run a threat intelligence program. By getting that feedback from folks, all I would do is do something simple. I would send them whatever they asked for, that request for information. I'd give them a product. It might be a presentation. It might be a PowerPoint slide. It might even just be a paragraph of text. But then after they received it, and I know they've had some time with it, I would just send them a message with a Google form that populates, hey, this is what you asked for. This was the suspense date. And I just have 2 questions for you. Was it relevant? Or was it impactful? Scale 1 to 5. Now you can measure your impact for the organization or even just that specific person. And now you can say, okay, so I've been at 4.2 for impact. So that means I need more information that's going to be useful for folks. Or I got a 4.0 in relevancy. Oof. I need to work on delivering the right information to the right people. So yeah, I would say that that's probably been my biggest claim to fame when it comes to threat intelligence. But I mean, there's so many brilliant people doing incredible things in that space that, I mean, that my contribution is very, very small.
No, but thanks for sharing that experience. I think like it's really cool to see like, your thought process behind, building something that was supposed to help solve a problem, especially like coming from a different background, different experience, and looking at how things were done in the past, and coming to a place where it's like entirely new, and then building something to make things work there. And I think there's been a lot of really, really cool research and really cool security frameworks and like security tools released from various like brilliant cybersecurity professionals like yourself from Netflix. And I think one of the biggest things about Netflix is their presence with AWS Cloud. So I want to kind of dig a little bit deep into that. I'm sure you might have experienced some of that stuff doing threat intelligence in the cloud. How does it differ from traditional threat intelligence?
Yeah, I would say that the difference with threat intelligence, if you're just looking at just your classic threat intelligence, not focused on the cloud versus threat intelligence in the cloud, there's a bit of a nomenclature and the nuances to cloud that your traditional threat intelligence might not have. So for instance, it would be hard for me to bring in a computer and say, hey, I'm going to bring in this computer and I just spent all this money on it, but I'm going to connect it to the internet so that anyone can reach it. And then I'm going to walk away and forget about it.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely not.
really, really hard to do that.
Yeah.
Does it happen? I'm sure it does, but it is really hard to do that. But how easy is it to spin up an S3 bucket and just, hey, I just want to spin this up, just see what, okay, cool, looks good. Oh, someone starts putting stuff in there. Okay, cool, that's great. And then you forget about it.
Right.
And then you don't realize that you configured it to be reachable from the internet. And it might have sensitive information in it. So really looking at what are the folks out there in the world doing, not just from a threat perspective, the people that are doing the work against us, but the folks that might not have known better, or maybe made a mistake, or they left something vulnerable in their tech stack, right? You have to look at threats from all of those perspectives. A lot of times we're our own worst enemy. I'm not going to say that we're the weakest link, but sometimes we are our own worst enemy, because I would have to say that cybersecurity, although we are probably one of the most dynamic industries where we're having to learn constantly, I don't think there's a lot of space for us to learn, right? Because we feel like we have to be the expert when we come into a situation. So if someone's moving from on-prem, where they've been for, let's say they've been there for 20 years focused on on-prem cybersecurity, but now they're moving to the cloud, things are a little bit different nomenclature, different understanding, different ways to configure things. They might not know everything that they need to know to secure an S3 bucket or EC2 instance. So they might not want to ask. But if we can say that in this field of cybersecurity, it's better to ask the questions, ask as many questions as possible, even if you feel like they're dumb questions. Because one of the things I used to coach people on when they're moving from on-prem to cloud is, hey, have a conversation with your cloud provider, right? They're going to give you some of those best practices to utilize in your environment. So ask questions, say, hey, this is my first time standing this up. Tell me about how I should architect this to meet this particular need.
Yeah.
So I would say that those are some of the differences, just understanding the nomenclature, understanding the environment, and just understanding what does good look like is something that I would say is the difference between the two.
Yeah, I really like the point of asking questions, because I saw myself in that. Because prior to working at Datadog doing cloud detection engineering, I used to work, in various SOC environments for about, 2 years. So I was very much used to like traditional security, like, working with Windows endpoints, domain controllers, all of those things. Coming to an environment where everything is like so different, what I'm dealing with, like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, even Kubernetes sometimes. And I'm like, okay, I literally don't know what I'm doing, right? Like, I spend a lot of time like asking questions, like reaching out to people, having conversations like, hey, like, how does this work? I saw you build this rule. Like, what was your thought process behind building this detection for this cloud environment? And I realized over time, like, the more I ask questions, like the more information I'm able to gather, add that to my knowledge base, right? And when I'm asking questions later on, I'm asking better questions, right? I'm no longer asking the same questions around, oh, how do you do this or how do you do that? I'm asking questions around, I've done this, what do you think about what I've done about this, right? Rather than just trying to understand compared to when I first started. So I do think the piece of asking questions sort of like diverges across all aspects, whether it's threat intelligence for the cloud or even detection engineering in my experience. Moving forward from that, another thing that's really, really big right now is AI, right? Everyone is talking about AI,
Love it.
ChatGPT,
Hmm.
like, all these different tools that, are used for different purposes. And one thing about security is like we're very opinionated about different technologies, and we
Right.
look at ways by which we can, use them for different use cases. But in the field of threat intelligence, how do you think AI enhances this field, or what role do you see AI playing in this field?
I'll tell you what, if I would have had AI, a way to use AI, generative AI for my work back in the day, I'll tell you what, they would not have been able to tell me nothing,
I,
because
I
now I
believe
can
that.
take a concept that I really understand, or maybe it's an assessment that I'm
Mhm.
really clear on, but you can't just give someone an assessment without additional details.
Right.
So you have to, okay, all right, now I got to pull in all additional information, give them additional context. But imagine if you just had that idea and you knew, okay, I'm just going to pull some context from the internet, right? I'm going
Yeah.
to just say, hey, give me all the top 3 ways that ransomware works, right? And we just go boop, 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 boop. And I say, hey, these are the 3 ways that it work. The reason why we need to take X, Y, or Z initiative into our environment is because we would now stop these 2 from potentially happening, right?
Right.
So I it would just give that additional, not only additional research, which of course you got to take it with a grain of salt when you're dealing with a learning language model like that,
Hmm.
but just giving you a place to start from to give you that additional context.
Yeah.
Fact checked everything, of course, but it takes time to write all that stuff. And
Yeah.
sometimes people need more detail than just a little quick synopsis. So I would say if I had AI and I had access to it as a threat intelligence analyst, it's an easy day.
Yeah.
Easy day.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think there's so much potential, so much power in the possibilities that AI has to offer in terms of like different security use cases, that be threat intel, that be like cloud security, detection engineering. I think it's just a matter of like understanding like what the possibilities are, because the possibilities are really endless, and it's a tool, so it's really dependent on who is using the tool and how they're able
Mhm.
to leverage it for, their use cases. But I think we've kind of, talked a lot about your threat intelligence background, but another thing that is, pretty unique about you is your journey into content creation,
Mhm.
podcasting. I think like that's one thing that's like an uncharted path, especially in the security industry. A lot of
Right.
people kind of like, just transition from, whether working from some entry level security role and just like, go all the way to becoming a CISO or whatever the case is. But you've also, gone on this path of creating content, as it relates to cybersecurity and various other things. So let's start from like the beginning of that journey. How did that journey start? Especially with Hacker Valley Media. What sparked the
Yeah.
idea, and what made you want to get into it?
Yeah. So when I made that transition from the East Coast to the West Coast, that's when I started at Netflix. And I had a good buddy, Ron Eddings, who was already living in Silicon Valley, doing big things. He was making a lot of educational content for people that are wanting to write exploits and hack. And so he had a nice little house. It was him and another buddy. And then I moved in, and we had one more friend move in after me. And it was just 4 guys, 4 minority men, and basically in their 30s, working in cybersecurity, trying to get better, trying to push each other. During the week, we'd have folks that we'd bring in people that were doing yoga to teach us yoga.
Hmm.
We were doing breathing exercises on Sunday, and we really just tried to optimize our potential. And Ron and I were sitting around like, man, this is such a great experience that I don't think a lot of people are going to get. What would be a good way to share this with the world? And we used that same setup that you used for making those videos, and we just had a conversation. We had a
Hmm.
conversation about cybersecurity alchemy, which is taking something that's seemingly invaluable and making it very, very valuable, that had no value to something that had value. And we just kept hitting record every single week, week in and week out. We didn't start it to build a business. We started it to have number one, an excuse to have great conversations with great people, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had so many conversations with awesome people over just from having this show.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to use that as an excuse to talk to these people, but then also give back to our community that's been pretty good to us. And that went from one podcast to multiple podcasts to we started a web series called Technically Divided, and then it became a full-fledged organization that does creative agency work for cybersecurity brands, right?
Mhm.
Never in my wildest dreams that I think I was going to turn storytelling in cybersecurity into a business. But it all started with that one show, Hacker Valley Studio. You know, we've won some awards. You know, we've done some really cool things. We've worked with some brilliant people, some directors and actors and sports figures and chess grandmasters. I mean, you name it. We've really worked with some really awesome people. But at the end of the day, it was all about scaling impact, because
Right.
I like being a leader in cybersecurity. You know, leading a team is fantastic. But I felt like if I really wanted to make an impact in cybersecurity, it would have to be through content, through storytelling. And not just telling my story, but telling the story of others, talking about diversity of thought, diversity of background, culture, just really just try to raise all the boats in cybersecurity with that tide.
Yeah. What was that moment that, after, like you said, you were just recording like practically every week, but what was that moment when you realized like, okay, this is like going to be an actual thing. This is going to be a full-time thing, because you eventually transitioned into doing this full-time. Like, when did you realize that you wanted to do this and you could do this full-time? And how was that feeling leaping from, working in, corporate job or whatever setting you were in to
Right.
going into this full-time?
Yeah, I would say that moment was when we started to sign pretty big deals with some companies, right? Because
Yeah.
I didn't realize that even though we haven't had this big, grand career in marketing, we understand what cybersecurity practitioners need. We understand what their problems are,
Yeah.
and we know how to make content. And so, I mean, what else is there really to? I mean, of course, there's a bunch of back end stuff. I'm not taking anything away from marketing, because there's a lot of tradecraft in the marketing space that's really important. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to connect with somebody, understanding and empathizing with their position, and then being able to convey that information to them, I mean, you really can't lose when it comes to marketing if you do it from that perspective.
Right.
But whenever we found that, if we tie our trust that we've built with our entire community to a brand that we know is going to help the cybersecurity practitioner, then I mean, everybody wins, right?
Yeah.
If we brought on a bunch of brands, or we brought on a bunch of solutions that just were snake oil or weren't going to help anybody, number one, we were going to lose all the trust with the people that we've built, and we weren't going to be in business for very long. But when we realized if we can really tie great solutions to the people that we know and say, hey, this might help you in your situation, that's very valuable for a lot of folks.
Gotcha. So like, you obviously have, a lot of experience with this, building a brand, building various shows, various podcasts, a lot of stuff with creativity. For anyone who is sort of like a cybersecurity practitioner right now, right? Like myself, for example, and this is sort of a backhand way of asking for some advice, but what is your advice on, someone who is already like doing content of their own, right? Maybe even collaborating with someone else like you were doing, and wants to sort of take that leap into maybe even scaling their content into something full-time, where they're able to like sort of like, do everything that you're doing and probably even more full-time. Like, what is your advice for them? Like, how do you think they should go about that?
I would say my advice for them is twofold. Number one, if you want to create content, really find that thing that speaks to you. Because if you're only doing content because everyone else is doing content, or someone said you should be doing content, the longevity of you doing content is not going to be very long. But if you do content for the sake of doing content because you enjoy it, you're going to do content much longer. Does that mean you're going to be the most popular person in the world? No. That's the second part. The second part is really understanding who are you speaking to.
Yeah.
Right. Once you have this medium, you know what you want to say. Who are you specifically speaking to? Because I have this thing where if you really try to speak to everybody, you're not speaking to anyone. And so really getting clear, like, all right, if I'm going to create this show and it's going to be focused on security operations, and I really want to gear it towards people that work at small to medium-sized businesses. If all I do is talk about enterprise level software, that's not going to do it, right?
Right.
You're like, this guy's all he talks about is the most top tier solutions. I can't afford that stuff. But if I were to bring in people that understood, like, how do you do more with less with technology? How do you do more with less for people, right? How do I bring one person in that's high leverage in 3 different paradigms within my security program? That's where you start to get value to those people. Yeah. But if you come in and you don't really know who you're talking to, if you come in and you're only doing it just because you think you should do it, that's not the way to really do content. But when you find a niche, right? You found your place, you make great YouTube videos, right? You have the people that you're speaking to, walking them through their own journey, right? But you're also sharing a lot of your journey.
Yeah.
That's what resonates with people. It's valuable, it's interesting, entertaining. And so that's really the secret. And then after that, it's just keep doing that until you don't do it anymore.
Gotcha. Thanks for that solid piece of advice. I think another piece that is, super integral in, making content, whether for cybersecurity or anything in general, is the creativity piece, right? I've seen, a lot of your content. There is obviously a lot of elements of creativity in how you like spin different things, even when you're having technical conversations. So as someone who has the ability to sort of skillfully blend cybersecurity and creativity, how do you channel your creative energy, into those things and tell a story that is captivating and engaging and people actually want to listen to and resonate with?
Yeah, I would say, again, it goes back to your audience. So let's say you were going to give a presentation to an audience on the TED stage. More likely than not, you might have one, maybe two cybersecurity practitioners in that audience. So how are you going to convey something like ransomware to that entire audience? You might have to use an analogy and tell a story. I wrote an article for the Fed Bar Association. I think this might have been 2015 or so. And so the Fed Bar Association, it's a lot of lawyers that are really good at what they do, but they might not understand all of the concepts and the threats from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, what story could I tell to have someone understand ransomware pretty instantly? So I gave them this analogy. I said, I want you to imagine you are coming home from a long day of work. It's Friday. You can't wait to go into your house, just kick back, watch some TV, maybe order some food. But when you get to your door, you try your key and it doesn't work. You try, you're looking around, you're like, wait, is this even my house?
Yeah.
You know it's your house, but on the door, you realize that there's a note and it says, hey, if you want access to your house, you got to send 30 Bitcoin to this address. That's ransomware, right?
Yeah.
That's what ransomware is. And so you can see that in your mind.
Yeah.
And so someone that isn't super technical can understand that, okay, that's what ransomware is doing. Even though I haven't even got into the technical bits of what it does, they understand the concept of ransomware.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love like the element of storytelling and using scenarios that sort of speak to the audience that you're trying to talk to, right? So that anyone can easily understand that analogy of like, oh, this is how, something works in the sense of you no longer have access to, something that you should have access to, and this is what they're demanding. And you can easily tie that back into the original concept and make it a lot more easier to understand. Another aspect of creativity is, burnout. As creatives, like we put a lot of effort, time, energy into doing all these things, from creating scripts to organizing different things, making the videos, talking, editing, all of that stuff. How do you cope with burnout or having creative blocks as a creative in the cybersecurity field? Are there any sort of strategies or practices that you find helpful?
Yeah. What if I told you that you could be more creative by trying less?
Okay.
So let me paint a picture for you. Have you ever been working on something, you're just trying to figure it out, and you're like, man, I'm just like trying to figure this thing out. Forget it. I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna go take a shower, and then boom, eureka, I got it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because your brain went into default mode.
Hey, real quick, you know what's crazy? Over 60% of you watching right now are not subscribed. So do me a quick favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you also get notified whenever we drop any new video and you don't miss anything. So yeah, back to the video. Thank you. Back to the video.
Which means that it is easier for it to make connections from two disparate data points when your brain goes into default mode. This default mode happens when you're brushing your teeth, when you're walking, when you're doing things where your mind isn't necessarily over engaged in that executive function.
Yeah.
So the more we can get into that default mode, the easier it is for us to create, to bring those 2 points together.
Right.
When we're constantly fighting fires, when we're constantly trying and we're just like racking our brain trying to figure something out, it can be detrimental, right? That's where sometimes people get into writer's block. It's because you're trying too hard. Sometimes you have to let creativity flow. Sometimes you have to take a break from it if you're trying to do something specific. There's a book called Art of the Impossible by Stephen Kotler. Stephen Kotler is the foremost expert in flow research. I even got to talk to him in an interview a little while ago. And one of the things he talks about in the book is that if you're trying to solve a hard problem, the best thing you could do is like you think about that hard problem, go do a workout, and then do something that's restful. And then a lot of times your brain will just boom right into that default mode, maybe even get into flow to where you have an idea, then you could put that to work right away. And so I would say that the best thing you could do sometimes when you're trying to be creative is to just dial back a little bit, decompress, rest, and then boom, sometimes it just comes to you.
Love it, love it. It's definitely gonna take a lot of notes because sometimes I just find myself just like trying to like uh push through a problem. Right, I know
Yeah.
like it's obviously not working, but I try to like just sit there and figure it out. But I have found that in the past, when I just go out to my balcony and just like stare into nothing, or
Yeah.
maybe like go for a workout or even take a walk. Like I get these ideas, I come back and something works, and I move on from there. But I think that's definitely great advice. So you, in your introduction, you said that you are currently an advisory CISO at Huntress. So first and foremost, congratulations on that, because I know
Appreciate it.
that's pretty
Thank you.
recent. But could you describe what a typical day or week in that role looks like, and what those responsibilities entail?
Yeah. So I have the really cool responsibility of evangelizing the problem space that small and medium-sized businesses are facing, because a lot of the great and awesome solutions that we're creating, they really only scale to enterprise level customers.
Yeah.
What about the rest of folks, right? The folks that might have one or two IT folks, but they don't really have any security folks. They might learn security as like a second language, but it's not their first language.
Mhm.
And so now I'm talking about like, how do we take these folks, whether you're talking about MSPs, you're talking about IT folks, how do we get them acclimated to cybersecurity better so that they can make better decisions, have more confidence when they're dealing with things like incidents?
Mhm.
Because I mean, I think we've left it mystical and magical enough, long enough in cybersecurity that, oh, you got to be a brilliant genius to do this stuff. But that's not really the case. I think the more we can share this information, the easier it's going to get on us.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen somebody on, I don't know, Twitter talk about, oh, they're so stupid, they should have done this, they should have done that, they know better than, not use MFA? But what if everyone had that as a base level of understanding for cybersecurity? Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be awesome? Wouldn't
Yeah.
it be great for us to be able to focus on some of the harder challenges? So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm doing at Huntress. Is I'm really having conversations with our customers, like ensuring that they have the confidence to do some of the cybersecurity stuff that they're doing, but then also talking to the cybersecurity practitioners out there in the world. Like, how do we do more with less? And given this economic environment that we're dealing with right now, all this uncertainty, all of these layoffs, right? People are getting tired of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. How do we execute? How do
Yeah.
we improve? How do we operationalize excellence in ourselves and in others to do more with less? And that's what I talk about on a day-to-day basis.
Gotcha. That sounds pretty cool. And how do you think that all of your experience over these years sort of helps you sort of, have these conversations and, make that impact with these different businesses?
I would say it's really it's been a confluence of really cool things, because I have my technical experience, which on itself is very valuable. But now
Yeah.
I have this ability to communicate and share learnings with other folks. But
Yeah.
then I also have the ability to pull learnings out of other people, because it's not
Mhm.
just me. I'm not this walking brilliant geniuses that's just spouting all this philosophy, but
Yeah.
really just being able to pull the knowledge out of other people and then sharing that and blasting that out to everyone else to raise all those boats. I would say that's what's really been the biggest, I guess, the biggest advantage that I've had in doing this type of work.
Gotcha. Gotcha. One thing that I love to ask, all the guests on the podcast is, about their opinions and thoughts on both college and certification. So starting
Yep.
with college education, you obviously have a wealth of experience as a cybersecurity protection practitioner, and you've also been in different leadership positions. So what is your perspective of the value of college education in the field, and how important do you think formal education is compared to practical experience?
I think it really depends on a lot of scenarios. If someone is better suited in a really rigorous and architected learning environment, I think
Mhm.
a 4-year degree is fantastic. If they're like, hey, I don't know what to do, just tell me what to do for the next 4 years and I'll get it done. I
Yeah.
think it's easier for someone to follow that path. Not saying that there aren't degrees that people should go into, whether they learn that way or not, because there are definitely some deep technical fields that I would say a 4-year degree would be very beneficial. So for instance, computer engineering is a great, fantastic degree that you could do a lot with in cybersecurity or technology. And it'd be hard to do it on your own. Not saying it's impossible, but it'd be relatively tough. But then looking at other things like certifications, right? Great certifications are great for, you know, getting the job sometimes. Sometimes it's great for exposure. Sometimes you just want to do the cert just to go through the exposure of learning all this stuff. And so then the certification is secondary. But I would say that learn how you learn best, right? Put yourself in those situations. Do projects, because 4-year degree and a certification is not going to cut it. Get your hands dirty with whatever it is that you're trying to do. Work with the people that you want to be your peers one day, and eventually maybe even lead them one day. Those are more important aspects of the cybersecurity journey. But I would say do leverage 4-year degrees, do leverage certifications, but don't make them everything.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's really the basis of, like, you know, using specific things to propel your career forward, right? They serve a specific purpose of maybe giving you structure, giving you a curriculum that is guided. You know, for some people that works out. For some people, you know, they're more self-starters, so like they don't necessarily need that structure or like that. They're self-motivated, so they can go out there, search for that knowledge, and easily get those things. But I think, like you said, finding what works best for you, understanding how you learn, how you understand things, and then leveraging the best path forward for that, whether that be through college or certifications or a combination of both, which is kind of like, you know, what I did. But I do appreciate your advice on that. Let's, you know, diverge a little bit from, you know, cybersecurity and all of that stuff. What are some things you enjoy to do outside of, you know, cybersecurity or making content? You know, any interest or activities and stuff like that?
Well, I've been really deep in AI, so I've been helping a few companies with some of their startups, which has been really exciting. It kind of reminds me of the NFT blockchain days, which I was really excited about for a while, but recently went through a bit of a winter itself. But I think on the AI side, I think AI is really going to change a lot. Like you were saying, there's mixed reactions, even on the cybersecurity side, of like, oh, I'm so tired of AI. But I mean, AI is here to change the game, and if you don't keep up, you're going to get left behind. And so I would say I love AI and what it's going to do. Is it scary in some ways? 100%, because it's moving so fast, and it's going to be able to do things that I can't even fathom very quickly. But I would say that it's better to be on that cutting edge with everyone else than just be catching up 10 years down the road. Be like, I should have looked at this sooner.
Yeah. No, I love that. So, you know, looking ahead, what do you envision for your future as a practitioner, a creative, and also for the future of Hacker Valley Media? Are there any specific aspirations and goals that you're, you know, open to sharing about that?
100%. We have some really cool projects coming up on the Hacker Valley side. We actually have a think tank that we just started. More information about that coming out very, very soon. It's been a pet project of mine for the last few months, doing it alongside with my partner, good friend William Lynn, who just started his own company. And I mean, just more content, right? You've been playing around with some of the fictional stuff as well, and so we've been dipping into those waters, which has been really, really fun. And then even more high value informational content. Like the more exciting, the more entertaining, but the more impactful you can, that edutainment sort of brand. We have some really cool ideas in that arena that I think people are going to see really, really soon. But yeah, just looking forward to do more of that. I'm really excited to do the stuff that I'm doing with Huntress, really starting to expose more people to cybersecurity, exposing people to the stuff that Huntress is doing on their end, because I mean, their threat ops team is off the chain. Definitely check them out if you haven't heard of the threat ops team over at Huntress. But me personally, I just want to continue to help people as much as I can, because I felt like I was kind of alone, going it alone for a long time in my early career in cybersecurity. And so trying to be that resource that I wish I had is really important to me. But you're doing the same thing, being a resource for people in their career and their lives. So hats off to you for what you're doing too.
No, thank you very much. And I'm definitely excited for what the future holds for yourself as well as Hacker Valley Media. So before we round up, do you have any sort of final words or messages you'd like to share with the audience? Just for context, it's more of a entry-level, mid-level audience. So like people who are sort of starting their careers or sort of just progressing somewhere in the middle of their careers. So any sort of final thoughts for them?
I would say I'll give you a couple of things. The people that are first starting, I created another framework. I'll go through it as quick as I can. Made this during the pandemic. It's called Exist. And it's basically how do you discover different worlds within anything? And you can focus this on your career. You can focus on cybersecurity, sports, hobbies, whatever you want to call it. Another acronym. EX is explore, right? Explore everything. Expose yourself to all kinds of different things in cybersecurity on the defense side, on offense side, policy, compliance, everything. You're going to find that thing that's really interesting to you. Like, ooh, this piques my interest. I love solving puzzles. I'm going to do threat hunting, or I love, being calm in a crisis incident response. Once you find that thing, the next one is the I and the S. The I is immerse yourself, surround yourself with the ideologies, the imagery, the people, because you will learn a lot through osmosis. Join the groups, have those conversations, read books, not necessarily to study, but just to get used to the lexicon and all that good stuff. Then that S is the study. That's where the rubber meets the road, where you practice, where you're reading to really understand and take that certification. You're going through AWS, different scenarios. You say, okay, this is how you configure this. Maybe you're even doing things like CTFs or TryHackMe or whatever it is. You're really starting to get that tactile understanding of what you need to do in this field. And then that T is translate or transform, right? Sure, it might be great for us to learn all this stuff and keep it all to ourselves, but we really want to make an impact in our organizations. We want to make an impact in our community or even in our youth. So translate, being able to take that information and that experience that you've learned over your career, share that with folks, share it with kids, your peers, share it on stage, share it in a podcast and a social media post, or transform your organization, transform your industry, maybe your media and entertainment. Or maybe you can transform cybersecurity altogether and create something new, an open source project or a solution that supports SMBs, right? We were just talking about SMBs. So I would say, exists. So explore, immerse, study, translate, transform what you're doing. That's the model.
Absolutely. I appreciate that advice, and I'm sure the viewers also appreciate it. Thank you so much for, doing this. I think you have a lot of experience, a lot of insight that is super valuable, both on the technical side, the practitioner side, as well as the creative side. And I think a lot of people are going to find value in that. So where can people find you and connect with you online?
Yeah, my home away from home is LinkedIn. Chris Cochran, come find me there. Also, you can definitely check out the Hacker Valley website. We have a lot of our podcasts, our shows, our web series, and all that. HackerValley.com. And if you want to join our little community, it's hackervalley.com/Discord. Pop in there. Just say hello. Found you from Dave's show, right? And definitely don't be a stranger. And if you're really interested in getting better at storytelling or creativity in general, we do have a Patreon where we focus on a monthly mastermind focused on creativity, leveraging a brain trust of folks that are really deep creatively in cybersecurity. And then you could just go to patreon.com/house. And we'd love to have you there as well.
Amazing. I would leave the links to all these things in the description below so everyone can have access to them. But thank you so much, Chris, for your time. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Day. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to click here for future and previous episodes of the podcast. And also, don't forget to subscribe. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you.